Zoom?
Good to go, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So usually we start with the minutes. It sounds like the minutes weren't sent through, so maybe,
Recording in progress.
Sorry.
yeah. Make a note just for next month
Yep.
to do 2 sets meeting. I think that sounds about right.
Yep, sorry about that.
No. So we have 2 items under new business, so we'll go in order. And I'm not sure who put these on, but plastic problem? Sounds like anyone here could weigh in. Who put this on the agenda?
That was me.
Go for it.
So I asked Peter and Kate to put this on the agenda, which interestingly enough, I don't know if any of you caught, but this morning, the Environment and Public Works, a subcommittee of them in Washington, had the final hearing of 2022, which was about plastic waste solutions. So it's sort of timing-wise very well. But part of the, first of all, I just want to give the caveat that I'm going to focus on plastic, but I don't want us to lose sight of the bigger umbrella of waste. So we've spent a lot of time talking about other pieces as far as sustainability, but you know, I don't want to forget about composting and recycling and material usage and obviously plastic. I also want to say that I know a lot of people in this room have spent a lot of time on this, so I apologize if a lot of it is redundant and repetitive, but I feel like it's worth repeating, and the science is always changing, and what we're learning is growing, so I just kind of want to make sure that this is on everybody's radar. So part of the piece of this is that when we were looking at caps in the spring, in my opinion, some of the better ones had waste as one of their components. They talked about transportation and buildings and efficiency and renewable energies, and we've had great conversations about all those things in here, about community power and TCAG and all the work that Tori and Aubrey are doing. But I feels like the waste conversation hasn't really happened yet. And so I just want to make sure that's not lost, especially because fossil fuel companies see the writing on the wall. They know that we are shifting to EVs and renewable energy, and so they are shifting too. And they are shifting to chemicals, and what that means is plastic. And I also don't want to discredit all plastic. There is a role that plastic has. It's important for healthcare, it's important to help make our cars more efficient, it's important for safety, bike helmets, ski helmets, those applications. But really what I'm talking is single-use plastic. And you guys all know examples of that, you know, straws, plastic utensils, K-cups, takeout containers, personal care products. Packaging alone is 40% of all the plastic we used, which is just completely unnecessary plastic. It's just, somebody shared the other day, they bought a hammer wrapped in plastic. I'm like, why do you need to buy a hammer wrapped in plastic? You can switch sides. So what does this mean? If we were to consider the plastic industry and kind of rank it like we do as far as countries and our impact, their impact on greenhouse gas emitters, it would be number 5 in the world. It is anticipated that if the plastic industry continues on its current course, it will actually exceed coal in greenhouse gas emissions within the next decade. And over half the plastic they estimate that we've ever made, you know, so we started producing plastic somewhere in the 50s, but over half of all that's ever been made has been made in the last 18 years or so, and that's anticipated to double again in the next 20 if we continue on this current track. So right now, you know, it's just growing exponentially.
So, I'm sorry, Jessica, can we look at that slide a second?
Yeah.
It looks like it really has a lot on it because it says primary waste, all waste, incinerated, and recycled.
Yeah.
So does the top line include all the under categories?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll kind of talk about all those pieces
good.
in general, but just to kind of show you how much
Wow.
plastic production has increased and therefore plastic waste has increased as well. And specifically really in the last 20 years or so.
And sorry, one more clarification.
Yeah.
What does CAP stand for?
a climate action plan.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so Portsmouth is currently working on ours. That'll be part of our discussion. We're looking for a consultant now.
Perfect.
But we've been doing a lot of back work to get ready for that. So this has a lot of information going on, but essentially the point of it is that there are issues with plastic from the production, which it is created by cracking oil, and actually one of the products that they're using most these days is ethane, which is a byproduct of fracking. So they take that ethane byproduct, and then they put it into another facility where they crack it and make ethylene or polyethylene. And these facilities are, you know, those big giant smokestacks kind of facilities. They are not nice, clean facilities by any means. So it's issues from just the process of how it's extracted and what they do to convert it to plastic. Then obviously in the production process, shipping, they ship the ethane around the world for other countries to produce plastic. Then they also obviously ship the plastic all over the world. And then obviously in its end life, we all know about this. You know, there's discussion of recycling, but that's a piece we'll talk about further. It's landfilled, or it's, you know, which oftentimes it gets mismanaged when it's landfilled, intentionally or not, or it's incinerated. So there's no clean line here when you're talking about plastic. So if we talk about recycling specifically, sorry, I just lost my place. I think that we need to really think about that it's important to keep recycling metal, glass, cardboard, and aluminum. But if you're looking at plastic specifically, we really only recycle about 5 to 6% of it. There are so many issues with recycling. A lot of it is the type of plastic. You can really only recycle 1s and 2s. There's contamination issues, so if it's not clean, it can't be recycled. If films or plastic bags wind up in the recycling process, that just gums up the recycling machines, so then that doesn't really work. And one of the biggest things that I think people need to understand about when you say plastic being recycled is that it's really downcycled. So there's a limited life on how many times plastic can be recycled. You know, some of those other materials, you can recycle them over and over and over again endlessly. Every time you recycle plastic, it deteriorates a little bit and degrades a little bit. So it's ultimately being recycled, but into a less or an inferior product. And so oftentimes you can't make food grade items out of recycled plastic. It's often cheaper to use virgin material. And actually today I heard one of the senators talk about the 3 Bs instead of the 3 Rs as far as what happens to recycled. Again, it's usually either buried, burned, or it winds up out at sea. And the other piece that I would add to that is, you know, we've all seen those trash islands out in the middle of the oceans and the gyres and all the things they talk about. That is actually very little of the plastic that's in the ocean. Most of it sinks to the bottom. So you're literally kind of talking about tip of the iceberg kind of scenario for what's happening to plastic in the ocean. The other piece about recycling is you'll also hear about advanced recycling or chemical recycling or pyrolysis. This is something that the plastic industry is really advocating for right now and suggesting is a source of fuel for us. Essentially, they're burning plastic. So there's some major concerns about that in general. I've read some things that have said from some of the initial plants and things that they've done around these, the amount of energy it takes to run the plant, they couldn't keep up with how much plastic they needed to burn, to recycle, to make it profitable to actually sell any energy to anybody else. It was just enough to sort of sustain the plant. So I think, and I would also add to this that some recent New Hampshire legislation has kind of opened the door for this for us in particularly. A lot of the surrounding states have said no to this, but we've provided them a doorway in, so it's likely that we could have a site at some point.
What legislation are you talking about?
I can't remember specifically, but I know some of the DES stuff that just happened.
Okay.
That some of the things that they talked about in there, that sort of, it didn't say they could do it, but it didn't say they couldn't do it. So it's sort of allowed for this.
Gotcha. So it's not a no, which is
Yeah,
what surrounding states are doing.
exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So this would be like clean incineration?
Yeah, I mean, I
Right.
don't even know if they would call it that, but you'll hear them
I know,
say-
I'm just kind of putting
yeah.
air quotes, I'm joking. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think that's what you were referring to also, is that burning of plastics really, I mean, there's no value, and there's probably negative side effects of doing that anyway.
Right. Exactly.
Can I ask a
Yeah.
clarifying question? What direction are you seeing most of the corporations start to move in? Because they're obviously, a lot of it's incorporated in the design process and what's chosen in sourcing, but then a lot of the times, at least when I've worked with corporates, it's been, where do they save the most money? How can they increase their value proposition or reduce their overall cost? Which directions are you seeing most of the corporates moving in? Are they like trying to figure out how to like downcycle and overmold over it? I mean, what are you kind of seeing?
So it's a bit of a mix. I mean, there are major corporations like Coca-Cola who are committing to using recyclable bottles by 2030. At least 25% of the stuff they put out will be that way. But again, it's, you know, it's sort of this give and take. Obviously, the fossil fuel company is really strong, and some of those bigger companies like that are invested in petrochemicals as well. So, you know, I think it's still hard to see at this point. Yeah.
And most, from what I read, a lot of those companies that have pledged to be X whatever in X years are behind where they should be, right? And so
Exactly.
it's a promise, but as of now, it's not looking too promising.
Right,
Right.
exactly. And a lot of it, I think, which is another piece we'll talk about, is that a lot of this stuff, ultimately, they try to, it falls to us to be proactive, you know, like Starbucks will encourage you to bring your own travel mug or those kinds of things, but they're still need to work on their processes internally to really shift some of those pieces.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I will say, by no means am I an expert, like, just for the, you know, I own a low waste store, this is personally very important to me, but again, there's a wealth of information out there, there's so much, so I'm just doing my best to keep up as best I can.
Part of the reason I was asking, I was working with Covestra, which is a big material supplier, and they were saying that they know that the push is coming to switch over, but they're saying that corporations are not willing to pay the extra for the for upcycled versus. I
Right.
mean, it's tough to upcycle it.
Yep.
But they want to do more, but they don't necessarily know how, and they're not getting that demand. So it's kind of where the money goes, the focus
Right.
flows, right? So-
Yep, yeah.
But okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I've started to touch on these pieces a little bit, but sort of how it relates to us more specifically. I know this is a really bad graph. You can't see it clearly at all. It's on Portsmouth's DPW website. It's called the Historical Mixed Recycling Tip Fee per ton. It's not super complete for me, but the point that I was trying to make, at least from a fiscal perspective, is that, you know, we know the majority of what we are trying to recycle is plastic. We know that there are major issues with recycling, with contamination, and that the second line is actually a sentence that's right above this graph when you go to DPW's website. So it says that the entire load might be labeled as trash, and then it leads to increased processing costs. So what that graph actually shows is from roughly, it starts at January 2013. We were paying about $20 a tip fee per ton. And in 2020, we were paying almost $140 for a ton.
That's because of this contamination.
And that's the piece that I'm not clear about, but my consideration would be that it's probably contamination, it's probably that there's more plastic there, you know, I'm sure there's a piece of it that cost just went up in general, if anybody can speak to it better.
Cost of skyrocketed.
Yeah.
So why is there a jump in plastic contamination then?
I don't necessarily think it's a jump. I think it's just part of the issue, is
Oh,
that
okay.
we are producing more plastic. We keep thinking, you know, we keep being told, oh yeah, you can recycle it, you can recycle it, you can recycle it. But in actuality, there's very little that can be recycled, and contamination is one of the pieces of why there is so little.
I think a big part of the jump in fees was because China was absorbing most
Right.
of the recycling stream,
Right.
and they stopped doing that, so then the market just dropped out for actually buying it for
Also,
recycling.
landfill fees have also gone up as well, aside
Right.
from recycling. So in general, landfills are finding tighter space to,
Right.
so like both of those have gone up. Recycling has gone up commensurately, more so than landfills, but they're both on the increase. Steve?
I can sort of vouch for that, having seen it firsthand at the DPW when China stopped taking the recycling, the tipping fees jumped from like what was it, like $20 to like $80 a ton or something like that, just instantly. And as far as the contamination of lows, that's something we've kind of dealt with. I mean, we deal with that even in the compost pile, because people just don't seem to know where to put their trash. They don't seem to know where to put their compost. They don't seem interested. They just throw whatever, wherever. So that's kind of a public education issue. But yeah, it's almost at the point where it's cheaper for the city just to call it trash than it is to recycle. They recycle because they're mandated to, and it is the right thing to do. But if it comes down to dollars and cents, it's cheaper to get rid of trash at this point in time, which is unfortunate, but.
Now, one question I have for the city is, at least the last time I checked the website, which wasn't that long ago, in the last year, on plastics, they still say in the single stream you can do 1 through 5, I think it is, right? But if only 1 and 2 are actually recyclable, why am I bothering to clean out the Stonyfield Farm number 5s and throw them in there?
I don't know, that's a good question. And I would say, I think the
Come on, man, you're the
DPW
public
does a
works.
good job, you know, we do have Mr. Fox there, they offer lots of opportunities to recycle things, so this is not an attack on DPW by any means, I think it's just the broader picture of what's happening, so.
And I was gonna add that there's an advantage to being able to tell people that you can recycle all these containers. Even if they're not ultimately recyclable, if it's okay for them to go into the bin and not contaminate everything else, right? So they may get separated out later, 3, 4, 5, they get separated out later. But if 1 and 2 are still recyclable, we can get people to participate more if they don't have to make those decisions in their household.
Like look at whether it's 1 or 2.
Yeah,
One or
just
3.
make it clean, put it in the bin, just don't put in, plastic bags and don't put in, plastic wrap. Yeah, exactly.
And is that what advanced recycling and CAPS is meant to go to, is the ability to automate the sorting and keep the streams clean?
I mean, so from, some of the caps that we read, I think it was really looking about usage and some of the other pieces of it, and maybe trying to make sure that their current recycling systems were more effective, and education to residents was better about, what can actually be recycled and things. But, clearly just from this discussion, we're all pretty knowledgeable and we all still have lots of questions. So that, again, is another piece why I just don't want this to get lost in the conversation.
Just, sorry, before I continue, I think one point that I think is interesting is, there's people are always gonna misbehave and not know what to do. But I do think there is a chance to improve the enablement, in that, like, if you look at the city's website, there's like 4 different pages for recycling. There's like standard, recycling, there's the special chemicals day, then they redirect you outside to like a waste management site. So I think, consolidating that into one master page would make it easier for people, because you really do need to play around and understand where you're looking. And I think secondarily, I think adding, just before I continue, on that note, if you look at the City of Portsmouth website, the Facebook group, there's always these interesting things where people are like, can you recycle the paper milk cartons, right? And there was like 100 comments where people going back and forth, right? And so I think people want to do the right thing, they just don't know. And I think as of now, the city website maybe doesn't call those things out, right? Pizza boxes, for a while those weren't recyclable, but now some recycling stations are taking those, right? So if that is ultimately where our recycling is going, let's put it on the website, and that's like a very small win, but it just helps educate people. So I think that is one very small project that might be interesting to try to change behaviors. And then secondarily, something we talked about a little while ago was putting in resources, putting in non-city resources to dispose of waste. So if you have large appliances, where do you, city takes them, Best Buy will take them, you know, Goodwill will take them if they're like good. Like, how do we kind of push people to those resources that divert stuff from ultimately going to the city, whether it's for trash or recycling, right? Like, where do people donate old books? And sometimes they have, I think, the container at DPW, sometimes they don't. There are places around town that do take some of that stuff, and I think we can, so I think it'd be interesting to create this like large matrix. I mean, here's what the city does, here's when they do it, here's the, you know, price. But then secondarily, like, hey, all these other things, like, you can get rid of stuff, because I think people want to help. A lot of people do want to do the right thing, and ultimately that hopefully saves some stuff from just getting dropped off at the recycling station and maybe even in the wrong place.
Yeah, it reduces the strain on the infrastructure deeply.
Right. And gets reused, right? You know, it's,
And the city has in the capital improvement plan last year a free cycle shop to be at the transfer station, I believe.
Yeah, I've
So
seen
that's a
other
great
cities that have that.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, sorry, Jessica.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, one of the takeaways from that is, and it comes up a lot, it's about education, right? Maybe it's education on the city site, maybe some cooperation with the Facebook administrators, but the information's out there, but we need to make it more digestible and more consolidated.
Jess?
After you,
Oh,
You gotta say your name first.
yeah, you're first.
I was just gonna say, what's happening with the mixed plastics? Because a lot of times plastic components are, they're kind of, they're modular, right? You're able to pull the components apart, but most of the time, they're not just one plastic. So when that comes in to the waste stream, are those just discarded, or what's happening?
Yeah, again, another good question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Or
Likely-
do you mean
likely it's
locally
getting
here?
trashed.
Yeah.
So just listening to the comments here about education, I'm curious, just a thought is, it might be justified, the city to put together what I call a placemat. I'm in the IT space, and we talk about placemats being, you know, all this great information that's in one spot. Maybe it's laminated, and handing that out to citizens. I battle constantly with my wife. No matter how many times I tell her, she always seems to put stuff in the recycling bin that I have to pull out. No, you can't recycle this dog food bag, or, I mean, there's all sorts of things. She shoves everything in the recycling bin, thinking she's doing the right thing. But then I'm wondering,
Aspirational recycling.
yeah, but I'm
Cycling, it's called wish cycling.
we're cycling.
Yeah.
But what I'm wondering is if we could clean up or put the right items in the recycling bin that really are recyclable and don't contaminate it, would that lead to cost efficiencies for the city, better for the environment, and we could justify the cost of, say, printing out something that people could keep right next to the recycling bin? Because you can put it on a website, but I tell you, when somebody goes to throw something in the recycling bin, they're not pulling up their cell phone to look at the city's website.
But I think it's twofold, right? Like, I think, you know, whatever we create, whether it's a matrix or, you know, however you describe it, I think having that is the first piece, and it should be listed on the website. It, you know, should be handed out when people get the recycling bins. It should be, I think the signage at the transfer station potentially could be improved, right? Like, I think it's fine, it says glass, it says, you know, wood. Like, what exactly does that mean? Like, can you have wood with glass? Like, I think trying to call it out. So I think all of that would help. Yeah, sorry.
Just going off the education piece at the high school, we've been trying, right now we're working a lot with composting and recycling, but with recycling, we've run into the issue with people don't even know that we recycle at the high school, and that's being teachers. And I mean, they're the ones dealing with probably the most amount of paper, and like, students aren't really even using, like, I'll walk by like a recycling bin and they'll be like random things that should not be in a recycling bin. So that's also part of it, is like we've been trying to implement it into the school, like our school, but we're having a bit of a difficult time with that, because either people aren't cooperating with it, or people just have no clue that we even do it at the school. So.
Sounds like the same problem on a smaller scale.
Right.
Not enough of the potential recyclers know what needs
Yeah.
to be done.
Sorry, just one more point. Sorry.
Yeah, this is why
I do think there's potential value in a small project, maybe for a subset of people, maybe on like this side of the table, not to volunteer. I think the plastic bag recycling, I think is, again, plastic stinks. We're all trying to get rid of it. And, hopefully people aren't using plastic shopping bags. But the plastic shopping bag recycling at the grocery stores has, again, no signage in terms of what they take, right? So I think most people expect that you can get rid of the regular grocery bags. But if you look at, I believe all that goes to like Trex, the company that makes like the plastic decking and chairs and stuff. If you look at what they take, and I believe it's that same program, they take bread bags, they take other things like that. And so like,
It's almost any thin film plastic, I think.
right, but I would guess a lot of people don't expect that they could recycle a bread bag, because that bread bag's just going in trash, right? And so like, could we come up with like signage for these grocery stores, knowing what they take, and just like put on those boxes, and like, does that improve the, plastic bag recycling rate by 1 or 2%? I don't know, maybe, but like, it's better than nothing. So hopefully that gets recycled, and hopefully it doesn't get, contaminating, or, ruining like real recycling. So I'd be interested to see how we could kind of, I've tried calling grocery stores here and there. Maybe they would have a better response to some willful youth, but I don't know.
Do you have more slides, or,
I do, just a couple more.
okay, then I'll make my comments at the end.
Okay. I think the only other piece I would say on specific to us is that it feels that, any community should be concerned about plastic, but being a coastal community, we have an added piece, not only to be clear and sure about what is happening to our waste, since we have such direct access to main water streams, but also what's gonna be washing up on our shores. So that is another reason for me why it's just so important that we keep this on our radar. So we talk a lot about social justice when it comes to plastic in the plastic industry and plastic production. More than 90% of all the climate pollution that plastics currently reports to EPA is just 18 communities, mostly along the coastline of Texas and Louisiana. And those who live within the 3 miles of these facilities earn, you can read the side. I will also add, though, that is shifting a little bit, because they are building pipelines and new facilities in Ohio. And as I mentioned, right now as a state, we haven't really done anything to close our doors, so there is the potential that we might be having some piece of this in, a surrounding community or somewhere here in New Hampshire as well. And then the other piece of this social justice thing is, Aubrey mentioned that China closed the door a few years ago. We are still shipping a lot of our waste overseas to countries who do not have the infrastructure to handle or manage it. So they are just living among mountains of Western world trash and essentially burning it in really rustic facilities. So,
We have an out of sight, out of mind problem.
yeah, exactly. So a piece that, my PT side kicks in, and the piece of me that is a mom of young kids, is plastic in our house. It's estimated at this point that we all consume in one way or another about a credit card worth of plastic a week. So that means either it's coming in through the food you eat, the water you drink, possibly even the air you breathe. It's been found in our blood, our urine, living lung tissue, breast milk, on both sides of the placenta. So it's everywhere. plastic companies are not required to notify us about what components or chemicals are in plastic, and most chemicals in plastic have not been tested for their safety standards. Somebody did some research and some sort of testing and found that 75% of plastics tested right off the shelves have some sort of toxic component. And even if EPA is trying to, manage this and look out for us, they have over 85,000 chemicals on their inventory list for the Toxic Substance Control Act. So there's no way that they're gonna be able to keep track of all these things and what's around us. The big thing with plastics are that they are known endocrine disruptors, which means they're essentially hacking into our hormone system, which pretty much impacts every action your body takes. So there's growing evidence that plastic can be linked and a factor to breast cancer, prostate cancer, immune disorders, potentially ADHD and autism, just to name a few things. And one of the doctors who spoke, he's a leading Dr. John Peterson Myers, he reported today. And one of the things that he said was that they're seeing declines in sperm count in men. And if the trends that they're seeing right now, they made projections that as soon as by 2040, men can have zero sperm count from these endocrine disruptors and what it's doing to our bodies. And that's an old picture of my son with a clean credit card in his mouth.
You say by 2040 that was?
Yeah. And he had other alarming statistics. I can't remember if it was 2040 or later, but there was a projection about 1 in every 2 children could be diagnosed with being on the autism spectrum as well. 1 and 2. Yeah. So I don't want to be all doom and gloom. I mean, plastic is not fun, but I just, again, really want to make sure, we have the opportunity as we work on our CAP to really think about plastic, not just from the recycling piece, but really how we make our CAP and what we're thinking about building materials and, water treatment things, and even just talking about distributing pamphlets and stuff. What are we printing those things on? How are we shipping stuff? There's just really so many ways that we can really, if we are thoughtful about it, make change. And from a community engagement piece, I think these are actions that might get people on board and are a little easier to take, if nothing else, from a fiscal place. If you start suggesting to people buy an EV car or replace your heater or those kinds of things, that might feel really hard initially. But if you ask them, hey, just bring your travel mug every time you go to the coffee shop. Just say no to plastic utensils. Just really work on remembering your tote bags. Even things like, I didn't hear the button-up thing, but I would love if they had suggested people wrapping their windows in plastic, but maybe buying something that costs a little more that they could reuse for several years, instead of just buying the cheapest plastic that they can that is going to fall apart as soon as they try to take it off in the spring. So if we can just be thoughtful about some of those those things, and I think that could be another way for people to feel like they can make change now while they save up for their electric car. And I also want to mention that there are so many groups who are already working on this issue. Blue Ocean Society, they do beach cleanups all the time. They are very involved in fishing gear and do recycling of fishing line. They are studying microplastics on our beaches and what's happening. We have RAD, the Waste Reduction and Diversion Group. The Gundalo, I know they do a lot of education. Conservation Law Foundation is really involved at the state level. And the New Hampshire Network has a super active plastic working group, and they've been taking a ton of action to educate and create initiatives around the states to get towns on board about eliminating and cutting back on plastic use. Here in Portsmouth, we have our own Christina Dubin, who now works for a nonprofit, Beyond Plastic, and then we have the Eco Club and the Seacoast Students for Sustainability, who have worked on this issue for years. And I just think that's really important to make sure we keep all those groups in mind as resources and, partners in our efforts for not only just plastic, but waste, and as we move forward with our CAP and those kinds of things. and happy holidays.
Thanks.
Another non-doom and gloom story you may have heard is Canada just banned single-use plastic nationwide.
And England's, I just heard it.
Immediately in sale by the end of next year.
And England's expanding their ban as well. I didn't read the whole article, but I did see a headline that they are banning more single-use plastics.
Right, and Canada's goal is by 2030, no plastic waste. So they have a pretty impressive and ambitious plan countrywide.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's probably the
So any
answer,
good
is we
examples?
need legislation and, you know, this needs to be a systemic change, but also I feel like we are a motivated community, and so every little piece helps, and having everybody on board also helps, so, yeah.
Or I think you had a point, right?
I just wanted to thank you for bringing this. What occurs to me is that as a sustainability committee, we want to work at every level of intervention. And the banning on the higher level is the traction we need to get in the short period of time that we have. And on a personal level, I just want to say, this kind of thing makes a difference as presentation. I struggle at Hannaford. Should I buy the avocados are in 5 bags of plastic, or should I pay a few more cents and get the other one? You've now flipped me over every time. I'm not going to buy the nectarines or the thing. So one little step at a time. That makes me feel good and motivates. And this committee, when we get to talking about the CAP, the Climate Action Plan, and we hire somebody, this will be an important discussion to see where we can get to the highest leverage point and maybe influence the state or whatever. So thank you very much. That's what I
Thank you.
Good job, Jess. Thank you.
Thanks,
Very well.
Jess. My pleasure.
First off, super informative. Thank you so much for bringing this. And I'm just curious about a couple things that I'm new back to Portsmouth. So have you seen anything in the local restaurants where there's like reusable shared programs where it incentivizes for customer loyalty? For instance, I think there was a company, at least there's one in Munich, that if you went there and you got their container, every time you brought it back, you get a discount on the food. That was one that I was seeing for a company. There's also Loop, I think was another one, where for your household goods, but to incentivize you to brand loyalty to keep coming back. And then the other thing that I was seeing a lot of was, why would you, when you get a piece of food that lasts maybe a week, or if you get food will last a week, why do you need a container that lasts 1,000 years? And so I was seeing a big push upstream on right-sizing the packaging for the duration that the product needs. And so have you been seeing anything like mycelium, people pushing the direction of like mycelium packaging or right timing the packaging in this area?
So the restaurant stuff, and I don't know if anybody else has seen anything. I haven't seen any shift yet in Portsmouth. I know the New Hampshire Network Group, the Plastic Working Group, that is one of their big efforts right now, is that they are working on a program that would work, that they could start to implement in towns around the state and just see how it goes. I know there are several towns out west, and even, I don't know if it's the entire island, but a good chunk of one of the Hawaiian Islands that's now doing that, where they have return sites where you can bring back your reusable to-go containers and they get sanitized, and however many restaurants are participating. So I'm hoping that effort is coming this way, but I don't know if it's made it here just yet. And to your other piece, I feel like that sort of sits in that same camp. I don't know if it's filtered through to our local businesses yet, but I've heard of all those things and recommendations, and that's the other piece about this. There's so many, bioplastics, there's a lot of questions around that and whether that is actually a good alternative. And there are just so many pieces of this that you can kind of go down and explore and almost rabbit hole into. So yeah, there's a lot to think about.
I actually work in a restaurant, so I know we're not bad about it at my restaurant. I think it's just across the board. There's a lot that like customers aren't seeing. So like I'm back in the kitchen, like when I go back there, I'm a hostess, so I'm seeing those takeout orders and how much plastic they are. We used to have they're called pizza savers. They go under the pizza in the pizza box, and it used to be this like plastic like grid like. I don't know. I can't really explain it. We recently just switched to paper, which I think is a little. I prefer like just not. Why I don't know why we need them, but they're there. And we also were using styrofoam at one point, but then I yelled at them and told them that Portsmouth doesn't let you do that, so we stopped that. But we're using a lot of random plastic, like when we like everything's in bulk, so like. I was like, I noticed it yesterday because I was refilling like a Parmesan cheese, and the big thing of Parm was in like wrapped in plastic wrap, and it's just like those unnecessary things. Everything's in plastic, and it's not necessarily in restaurants that everybody's seeing. It's like 90% of that plastic is behind the scenes, and it's like I asked them why we were using like more plastic containers rather than like the paper ones and stuff, and they said it was honestly because they couldn't get them. There was a whole issue with they literally could not get them, so that's a whole other like. As easy as it could be to be like, oh, like we're gonna go use all paper,
Yeah. If you
or
can get it.
other containers. Like they're like we literally couldn't get them. So
So instead of just throwing questions, there's two solutions I've seen in California and San Francisco. If you go and get a nice smoothie, for instance, they give it to you in a nice glass jar, and then when you bring it back, you get $2, for instance. And so you'd collect them and you'd bring them back, and so it brought more business back to them. So the restaurants were like, yes, we want to do that. And then with all Germany loved beer, and so they would always charge a core charge when you bought your beer. Instead of being €1, it would be $1.25, so that you would be motivated to bring it back. So it was creating a financial incentive so people would actually take action, as opposed to we all know we should do more, but it doesn't necessarily happen. Or wish cycling, was that what the term? Wish cycling.
I'm sort of thinking of this, coming at it, Bert, you're talking about like, what's the highest level we can get to? Then there's the other piece of like, to change behavior, you start at the earliest level, which is our schools. And it's been a real challenge to get those behaviors to change. We have the recycling at the elementary schools. The kids don't have to rinse any of it out, so they've got the pictures. We've got really big pictures, so we're teaching them that you have to make a choice as to what you go, but then it's rushed, so then they're throwing it in, and now, since COVID, we're understaffed in all of our kitchens, so we've gone to completely plastic. I mean, you walk into the Portsmouth Middle School, and it is an entire wall of plastic utensils. We had gotten to a point where we had gotten the dishwashers, we were gonna order the utensils, and we have gone so far backwards at the schools. But I think when we talk about education and behavior, we have to come at it from both sides, because children can have an incredible impact on family behaviors and family purchasing. And there have been many active parents that have tried to get involved. It's been a very frustrating process at the school, so I'm open to, I think there are many people that would like to say, how can we start these behaviors right, early, consistently, so that as they grow into larger adults in our city, we've done the hard work early. So it's a massive problem in the schools. The waste is the largest I've seen in my time, so I'm sure it's the same at the high school. We're so understaffed.
You would hope that like the high school would be a little better about it, because I feel like one of our graduation requirements is what is it called? It's something ego. It's like
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know what it's called. It's some class where you talk about it's like all about the environment. I don't know why I can't think of it.
Grow Green. Is that what you're talking
No, I can't think of it, but we learn about like everything and how plastic hurts the environment and all these things. So you'd think that like high schoolers would be better at it, but like even it just at that point it's just so accessible. Like all of our sandwiches wrapped in plastic, our salads are in plastic, our utensils plastic. The utensils come in plastic with a napkin. And so it's just, it's a lot,
It's excessive.
yeah, so it's also just like, we got rid of the styrofoam in our lunchrooms, but now it's the plastic in our lunchrooms, and I think at this point, it's like the education piece for the younger generation should go to the, like, elementary schools, that way they're growing up with it, rather than when they're in high school, they're like, they don't know any better, so it's hard to ask.
It's too late to change the behavior.
Exactly.
I do know Little Harbor did a plastic-free lunch this fall. I don't know if all
Yes, no, yes. Unfortunately, it's like one.
Yeah.
So that's the problem.
Right.
And the lesson still, the hope is you come home, you talk to your parents about it, but then there's no follow-up to that. Like, okay, so we did this. What's the goal? Where do we hope to get with it? What's the stats? Like, how much plastic do we generate? What was today like? So, and it's always parent motivated, which it has always been, and everybody's understaffed. So not to say there's not interest in our admin to be green schools. But like, for example, Phil Davis presented to the board the other day, that's our one mainly green building. Well, the floor that we put in where they sit for lunch, you can't use water to wash it. So we have to use like a dry chemical to clean it, but that also means that the outside doors that come in, if they leak at all, there's rot around all of our sustainable floors. So we have a problem on all levels in terms of how we're educating the end goals of the district and how do we get there. We got to start somewhere. You're right, though. There's great efforts, but they're happening in these silos and not close enough together for the education piece.
I agree.
Steve?
So much to say. I'll try to keep it short. Yeah, so first of all, yes, I think on the individual level, we should all be trying to sort of reduce our consumption and usage, and that's important. But like has been pointed out, you're fighting an uphill battle because you go to the lunchroom and your plastic forks are wrapped in plastic. You buy a hammer and it's wrapped in plastic. And it's because the plastic industry has doubled down on their production for the future. They're building new plants to make more plastic because that's where the money is going to be. And so they're wrapping everything in plastic. And one of the things, and then they put it on the consumer to be like, well, you sort it out. You know, they don't pay for that. That's externalized costs. They don't. So, which is why I like the idea of extended producer responsibility in that legislation, because it puts the cost right on the manufacturer. If you wrap your hammer in plastic, well, then you're responsible for bringing that plastic back and recycling it. That's a cost on you because you chose to wrap a hammer in plastic. And so I'm just going to sort of, if you're not familiar with the extended producer responsibility legislation, so states are trying it. It's been proposed on the national level. I'm not sure where it is in Congress right now. There was a bill introduced in 2020. I think it was reintroduced in 2021. I'm not sure where it is at now. And I just checked an article I had saved from 2021, and it lists different states that we're currently working on EPR legislation. Maine signed an EPR bill. Oregon was working on it. California, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts. So now if Maine's going to do it, if Massachusetts is going to do it, where does that leave us? As usual, in the middle, behind our surrounding states. As usual. Unfortunately, it's the New Hampshire way. But that would be a huge start, because now manufacturers would be looking at how they package their product, because they know they're on the hook for dealing with that waste. Instead of wrapping your little plastic toy, in 47 other pieces of plastic, like happens now, it might just be wrapped in a paper box or something like that. So I like that idea, and I want to go that direction, but that's high-level stuff.
Unknown caller.
Again, to bring the discussion back to where we are, it does start at home, so yeah, maybe bring your.
No, I'm glad you brought it up, because I think that, and
Just-
bottle bills,
it's
I
just
think
so
we
much, you know?
need a bottle bill.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. And there was an article on
And
that.
that's the only, yeah.
And I don't know where that sits in the New Hampshire legislature, but I know there was talk about that as well. I'm not up to date on where that is, but that's my thoughts.
So I know we have a bunch more to talk about. Was there anything else people wanted to approach on this? Bert?
Steve, I love that you were kind of winding this up. This is where I was talking about intervening at a system. Probably in terms of state, we don't have the right to do it, but we're a big city, and if we put it into our cap, we can start from this committee pushing back and say to the states, this is where we'd like to go. So there's where I see, I love your input, and when we get to the climate action plan, these are the big ideas that I think will be worth pushing on. And so education and our collective mind to get the best leverage point for our kids. Thank you.
I have one more maybe closing question. On the city website, it says that a member of this, we should have a member of this committee that is from Public Works. I know Steve wears a couple different hats. I don't believe you're the official member.
I am not the official member.
I think we haven't had one since Jacob left. Is that something we should try to get back? Is that mandated or is that optional?
No, when Jacob came on is because he wanted to be on. And I don't think we are still a blue ribbon committee. So what's been nice, we kind of make up our own rules. If we become a standing committee, then that all gets spelled out and officially done.
Okay.
So I don't think we have a mandate.
Okay, we might want to remove from the website. It says that.
Okay, as far as I know, we've never acted upon
But
that.
Didn't we
related
have
to that is-
Brian Getz or something from the DPW here a few
He's an
times?
optional sit-in.
Yeah, he
Okay.
shows up time to time.
He's a great resource when he shows up, but yeah, it's because he wants to be here.
So that is on our website, that is, yeah, I believe you, is that? Okay.
I don't know. So I don't know what. All right. That was a good spirited conversation.
And I don't know who enforces it.
Solar canopies. That's
No,
me.
yeah, I don't think it is.
Let's hear it.
Yeah.
Same thing with the
Right.
Yeah, there's a seat for you, Fred. All right, so I had sent out an email a couple weeks ago proposing to add this to the agenda. I think it's an interesting topic. I'm not looking to get any more out of tonight than just to incite some dialogue about this as an opportunity potentially for the city of Portsmouth. Is everybody familiar with what a solar parking canopy is? Yeah, okay. And you've probably seen pictures of them, and it really struck me when I was talking to somebody recently from Beverly, Massachusetts, and they recently did this, I believe, at their high school. And they partnered with an investment firm, which is the same thing that City of Portsmouth did when we put the solar array on top of the high school, and we put the solar array at the Madbury water treatment plant. We partnered with, it was Sunrays Investments, and Rebecca Perkins. I think most people here are familiar with Rebecca. She works for that organization. Also, the beauty about partnering with one of these investment firms is there's no capital outlay for the city, and there is ultimately a contract for the city to purchase from that investment firm electricity at a below market rate, or whatever that may be. So the city's able to, not only contribute to reducing greenhouse gases and the benefits to the environment, but the city's also paying less for electricity. So in that sense, they're saving money. And also, I think for being an eco-municipality, it really sends a message that, as a city, just like putting solar array on the roof of the high school sends a message to the students, it sends a message to the citizens that we are serious about being an eco-municipality. And the benefits, obviously, there's a tremendous benefit in producing the renewable energy, but also from the cars are parked. Protects the vehicles on a warmer day. When you get in the vehicle, it's not really hot because it's shaded. Also, potentially, we can produce electricity near where it's consumed or where it is consumed. So the high school, for example, it's great. High school consumes a lot of electricity. Well, hey, we've got a solar array on the roof. We're producing electricity right where it's being consumed. Same thing, I think, of the parking lots at the high school. Right, there's probably a great opportunity to extend those solar arrays into the parking lots. I completely understand that these solar parking canopies, cost more than putting a solar array, say, on the roof of the high school. Because there's more materials, you have steel and such, or aluminum that you have to install, there's construction costs for doing that. So I was reading 25, maybe 30% higher installation costs to do it for something, say, like the high school parking lot. But there's also, we have the new Inflation Reduction Act, and I'm not sure, but it's possible that we could get, some funds through something like that, some sort of grant for doing this in partnership with an investment firm. I also think about, we have 2 parking garages, and both of those have parking on the upper level.
Yes, they do.
And both of those potentially, you could have solar arrays from a canopy perspective on the roof there. So I want to just open up the floor and see, my plan is, before I open up the floor here for comments and discussion, my plan is to reach out to, and I'm going to come back to you, Kate, and to Peter, to discuss, to see if there's any interest on the city side to further this conversation with DPW and others. Because I think there's a great possibility here. I did previously discuss with Peter maybe some opportunities of putting a small wind generation, vertical wind generators on a city building or two. Peter said, well, there's not a lot of municipalities doing that for a number of reasons, and I understand why. Most of it is just the cost. It's cost prohibitive to do that right now. But solar is in a different situation. So I'm going to shut up now, and I'm curious what folks think.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Are you specifically talking about photovoltaic or all solar? Because I know there's a lot of implementation of solar to reduce HVAC costs as well.
Yeah. Well, in this case, I would think it would be EV. So, yeah, so this would be solar voltaic.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, thank you for bringing this one up. You hit one of my hotspots. Kate and I have spent a lot of time putting an awful lot of kilowatt hours worth of purchased electricity into the SIMAP system for the city's City of Portsmouth carbon footprint recently. So a couple of comments. First of all, as we discuss the cap with the consultant, I'd love to see some kind of metric that looks at, for example, replacing purchased kilowatt hours with solar kilowatt hours. It don't have to be 100%, but it's a metric. Now, that's point number one. Point number two, I love the fact that you brought up the rooftop solutions, because yes, there is a big chunk of real estate on top of both garages, and just picking those 2 in general. We know the cars go there. I can tell you for a fact that there are not nearly enough plug-in recharging sites at either of the garages. There just aren't. Now, the city's doing a great job in making more of those available, so I'm not trying to pile onto that, or maybe I am. But if it turns out that there's a capital-effective way to put solar arrays that can be parked under. So we're taking advantage of the space and taking advantage of the solar exposure, but not taking away the primary usage of the land, which in this case is parking the cars on the roof. That would be, I think, a great thing to look into. And if we could tie that back into we may not even be replacing purchased kilowatt hours. That may be net new that we're adding in. Maybe the top of the 2 garages add another 5, 10, 20 charging stations, which currently don't exist on the roof. They only exist wherever they've been wired in by ChargePoint. So anyhow, I love the idea, and I wanted to ask to clarify a question. That Beverly project, those were shade arrays. Those were canopies.
Yeah.
And what did the city of Beverly get involved in one of these investment partnerships to make that happen?
Yes, and I know I found out which company it was, and I don't remember, I didn't write it down unfortunately, but I could find out.
I think you sent the article around.
I did send the article. I think in the article it lists, one of the companies in just poking around the internet a little bit, there's a company that's based out of Connecticut called Green Skies. And I found, that's what these folks do. And they're the same as Sunrays Investments, which is
Okay.
based out of Portsmouth.
Right.
But they are a lot bigger.
Okay.
And they do a lot of municipal projects across the country. And one of the products that they implement is these solar canopy
Okay.
arrays. Yeah.
I would love seeing that be a more active part of our discussion. I mean,
Yeah.
if all works well, it could be a big payback for relatively low.
What an amazing opportunity. If the
Yeah.
city could do something like this at no cost to the taxpayers.
Yes.
Wow.
And to your other point, it's very visible.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I personally love the idea, and I think there's tons of parking lots that could take advantage of this around the city that are municipal lots, either downtown lots, all the schools, DPW has a big lot there. I mean, any of the city buildings could totally do that. This could also dovetail nicely into the community power once that gets off the ground, because that's totally within the same wheelhouse,
Yeah.
generating power as well as being the utility for the city.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
I think this ties back to an earlier discussion we had here about commercial solar arrays, and we kind of reached a dead end with that. It's too bad we don't have a couple of city councilors here now. I understand Kate and Josh had scheduling conflicts tonight, but I think it's something we should pursue, because, I mean, the city has parking lots, but then multiply by a factor of, I don't know, 20 more for the commercial lot space, if we're talking parking lots, for example. The other thing I wanted to mention is when we had the middle school students come and present, a lot of them talked about solar rooftops, and I think one even had a parking lot proposal, a covered parking lot. So I think we should touch base with them again. And finally is, to me, I see a connection with city and the capital improvement plan and the budgeting they do. And as we talked about, right now, the criteria for capital budget proposals don't really look at environmental or energy impacts. So that's something I'd like to work on longer term, like Bert said, at that higher level. And maybe some of the solar projects we're talking about would fit in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. I mean, you're preaching to the choir here, because, I mean, anywhere we can put solar panels, I'm, all for it. It would be interesting to see them on the roofs of the garages. I think that would, curious to know what the, sort of cost and payback, and is it really gonna cost us nothing? And, well, I know for what I'm told, the array at Madbury, for instance, sort of recoups partial cost of the operation of that plant. Now, that's a high usage plant, obviously, they use a lot of electricity. A parking garage, I imagine, uses much less electricity, so you might actually be coming out way ahead on a project like that. And it just makes me think that, likewise, you have other, and I've probably mentioned this before, places where we could put solar, and they've probably told me no before, and I'll just say it again, why not at the Jones Ave dump? There's nothing happening there. There's a big, open, sunny field that nothing happens in, and that would be a perfect place for a huge, for Portsmouth, that would be a huge solar array, and I don't see why we don't push harder to get something there as well, because that's wasted land, basically. But yeah, I think anywhere we can be creative and fit these arrays, I think is better. And it helps sort of the energy independence argument. The cost of producing solar keeps going down, 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 down. The cost of fossil fuels and electrical production from fossil fuels is going up, 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 up. So it helps the energy transition carry forward. So just, those are my thoughts on that.
Well, one of the benefits, and I think Jones Ave and that location is a great idea. One of the pieces about this, or the benefits, is that I love so much, is producing the electricity where it is consumed.
Yeah.
So when you look at the Portsmouth High School, how amazing is that?
Yeah.
I mean, we're not, all that electricity that's being produced there, I don't know if any of it's leaving the school, but I would imagine the majority of that electricity is consumed right there on that site.
Yeah.
And, you know, what a beautiful model.
Pretty low transmission costs.
Yeah, yeah, pretty low. And loss too, right? Because anytime
Yes,
you, I
absolutely.
mean, what's the loss of transmitting, I'm not an engineer, but transmitting electricity across wires and distances,
It's a lot.
it's a lot, yeah.
You know, we've had these discussions about solar and how to get more solar in our city. And they're great discussions, and we all support solar. But what's the action item that we can come up with so that some of this starts happening? And I don't know, maybe we need a subcommittee of this group to meet and have time with Kate and just focus on solar. And, have a list of the things we've talked about and say, okay, can this happen? What do we need to look at in terms of state law and zoning? How do we make this happen? Do we pull back in the Portsmouth Middle School? But I'd really like to see us turn this energy into some action.
Yeah, and I have a related question to that too. Is there anybody outside of this group, anyone either in the city government or anywhere else, who actually looks at what are the optimal sources of power for the city of Portsmouth? I'm thinking not, because until relatively recently, there was only one source, right, from source. But if, I'm just asking, is there anyone like that should be in these conversations? And
Well,
if not, if we're
yeah.
it, I agree with you, Effie, let's start putting some action.
I think our upcoming consultant is definitely gonna help us out with that.
Let's hope.
Well, yeah, hopefully. But, I mean, one of our main goals that was in the RFP that we all put together was renewable energy and sort of tackling that. And I think a big part of when the community engagement group and the whole sustainability committee sits down with the consultant and we do meeting after meeting of just working with them and telling them what we have seen, what we've studied, a lot of that is going to revolve around solar, and they're going to be, along with Peter and I and staff, like the zoning experts, how can we work this into our regulations? What are small impacts that we can get citizens to get behind, and how can we advertise that, social media, things like that. But I think a lot of it is going to come from our consultant trying to push our ideas and really advertise them. So
Right.
along with stuff like the IRA funding, which you mentioned, which we can try to tackle in the next year or two, hopefully.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of times final decisions are made on the financial basis as well. And the cost per kilowatt every year is going down on solar because they're just getting more efficient. I know they're still fairly inefficient for how much energy from the sun gets converted into usable energy, but every year the cost per kilowatt goes down, and every year the cost per gallon of fuel goes up. So I'm sure there could be a really nice, simple graph that makes it very clear that we're starting to hit this sweet point where the ROI is getting better and better and better and better. And so plotting the cost of kilowatt versus the cost of gas and looking at the ROI, that could be a really simple, clear way to get the message across that it is financially viable as well. We're getting closer, and there will probably be a sweet spot when it triggers.
Yeah.
I just like to emphasize, I think what Kate said, that this is a great setup for that. I'm aware we have about 42 minutes left. I think we have 2 more presentations and an update and a cap. So I'm going to suggest that make sure we respect the people who showed up for their reports, that we get to them. And so unless there's something else on this, I think we could move on.
Yeah, sounds good.
So you guys presenting on?
Sure.
I think Bill might have sent me some slides, or I don't
I'm
know
not
if you did.
sure.
Do you
No,
guys need
I don't think-
slides?
I don't think we.
Okay.
do have slides.
Okay,
Right.
they might be the same slides from last month,
else,
so.
Would you just introduce yourselves and just
Right.
give a little background?
Yeah, so, does it make sense for me to go first, or would you?
Yeah.
Okay. So my name's Matt Glenn. I am on the board of Seacoast Area Bicycle Riders and was one of the members of the Transport and Climate Action Group, working, led by Bill Lyons, and we presented last month, so most of you were here for that. Thank you for inviting us back. I believe what you were interested in hearing more about was some specifics on our bicycle and pedestrian policies, and so I'm ready to give a little bit of an overview of the Complete Streets policy and the bicycle and pedestrian plan, and I'd love to just open up a discussion on where they're working well and where we can come up with ways to make the progress a little bit faster on those pedestrian and bicycle improvements in particular, but looking at it through the climate lens of greenhouse gas reduction opportunities. So starting with the bike ped plan, it was created in 2014. It's quite a long document. How many of you were there for some of those meetings and providing input? Some of you. Okay, great. So how many of you have looked at it? It is quite a long document. I think I gravitate towards the maps and looking at my neighborhood and looking at the routes I use and what they recommend for routes. But I just looked at it again, more specifically the recommendation tables, and they have non-infrastructure recommendations as well. Those are ranked by safety, equity, feasibility, opportunity, and life cycle costs. Some of the highest recommendations under education and encouragement, they had bike safety classes for children and adults, which could be like bike rodeos in the elementary schools, adult programming, promoting the Safe Routes to School program with events. The top recommendations under engineering included completing a transit access study, improving snow clearance, which maybe there have been improvements since 2014, and updating signalized crossings, pedestrian crossings in particular. They had an evaluation category, and their highest recommendations there were to collect bike and pedestrian crash data annually and to form a standing bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee. So I'll come back to that later. Just behind that was to review and update the bicycle and pedestrian master plan every 2 years. Infrastructure recommendations, the specific roads are ranked for safety, connectivity, feasibility, if they're already in the capital improvement plan, and life cycle cost. So you don't see greenhouse gas reduction in that ranking, but I think it's safe to assume very close alignment. If you've made it easier to get around outside of a car, that has the potential to reduce greenhouse gases. So we don't have time to dive into all the street recommendations here, but I can report the major corridors are all on the list. So Lafayette Road and Middle, Route 33, Beverly Hill, Elwyn, Sagamore, Woodbury Ave, Maplewood, Market Street all receive high rankings, along with the Hampton Branch Rail Trail, which is finally happening. Smaller neighborhood streets like Dennett and the two-way portion of State Street also received high rankings to become bicycle boulevards, which involves really prioritizing slow and non-motorized traffic. It can be as simple as signage, identifying that as a nice, quieter route, sharrows, signs on the street. The better bicycle boulevards include diversions to prevent cars from using them as through streets. So there's a simple map at the very end of it with 3 different color codes to prioritize the implementation citywide. We can discuss a little bit, but I wanted to talk too about the Complete Streets policy. So that one's much shorter. It's a 4-page policy. Is anyone here familiar with the Complete Streets policy? Great. So I did a little bit of digging to see how it compares to other Complete Streets policies out there. If you're not familiar, I should just say, a definition, complete streets are streets that are designed and operated to enable safe access for all users so that pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and public transportation users of all ages and abilities are able to safely move along and across a street. So this policy is very close to what you see for Dover's Complete Streets policy. For almost any city or town across the country, you're likely to find something very similar. And there are national groups like Smart Growth America that have best practices and example language. So I think that's where ours came from in 2014, with minor adjustments between them. There's great goals in here, I can say, for making sure that the planning side across city departments includes complete streets. There's mention that financial flexibility is a part of it. These are often expensive projects when you try to accommodate every possible use on a roadway. Maintenance activities don't necessarily trigger requirements for major street improvements, but I like that there's language that maintenance activities do present some opportunities to improve the environment for other roadway users. There's a section on exceptions to the policy, so there are reasons that a street might not be required to be a complete street when it gets rebuilt. If, for example, the Route 1 bypass, bikes and pedestrians are not allowed on it, so it does not have to become a complete street, but another route should be provided close by. If existing right-of-way doesn't allow for it, then it's not required. And of course, we have a lot of old, narrow streets. So some reasonable exceptions, some language on best practices, and then what I'd like to highlight toward the end, we have performance measures. So complete streets should be continuously evaluated for success and opportunities for improvement. Regular evaluation and reporting of progress, user data, crash data, and so on. Number of miles of bike routes, of sidewalks, ADA accommodations. And then finally, in the implementation section, I wanted to highlight the very last line. The planning department shall make an annual report to the city council showing progress made in implementing this policy. So I think that's something to really highlight through our climate action plan, through our transport group, for the public to be really on board with this and aware of what's happening. I think there needs to be a public acknowledgement every year of here's what we've done, here's the data on it, and here's what we're planning, and a chance for public input. So that's supposed to be the planning department giving a report to the city council. I believe 2018 was the only time that's happened, although I may be wrong. So I think, my two big recommendations that keep coming up, evaluation, data collection, reporting. I expect to be talking to the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee about metrics and bike data and some of the numbers we can be counting, ways that volunteers can be collecting some of that. So that is a little bit in the works. But I'd love to talk more about that. And then secondly, a committee tasked with tracking compliance. So that's in our bicycle and pedestrian plan as a high priority to create a committee, bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee. It's in what the League of American Bicyclists says, so they give city rankings, and we are proudly advertising that we're a bronze level bicycle friendly community. We do have some good policies in place. We've made some good progress. But in their recommendations to move up a level to a silver ranking, the league says we should create an official bike and pedestrian advisory committee. Ensure the members of the committee reflect the diversity and ability levels of cyclists in your community, and ensure your complete streets policy is followed for all projects and compliance is tracked. So those, I think, are the biggest ones I just wanted to highlight, and love the chance to hear any discussion.
Hey, Matt, thanks, that's great. I might misunderstand the term complete street, but I think the one in front of the music hall, I think it's Chestnut Street, was designed as a complete street. So the sidewalk is the same level as the street. There's no curb, and it's just shown with the paving stones that there's a differentiation.
I believe in the bike ped plan, that's called something else, more
Oh, yeah.
like a sort of a pedestrian priority street or a.
Okay, so complete street
uh,
really refers to the multiple users
Right,
of the street
and
and
if
accommodating.
you have an extremely wide right-of-way, then that might involve driving lanes, sidewalk, and multi-use path. And of course, good transit access and ADA compliance. So Beverly Hill Road is a complete streets project that is now moving forward, and we'll have a multi-use path on one side, sidewalk on the other. In some places, travel lanes are removed to make that room for other uses, and traffic flow is sometimes the same or better in some situations. Maplewood Ave downtown has a complete streets plan, but it sounds like there's no appetite for really pushing it forward right now. So that's the multi-lane part.
Yep.
Right down to Congress Street, and unfortunately, I don't think it's moving forward. Yep.
Matt, I just love having you. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be when you presented last time. What I like and that I'm hearing is that what has been needed in the past is a structure that can get this to synergize with all the other things that are going on. And so the fact that you see this many people in the room here, we're at a unique period in Portsmouth history. And so just for other people's information, Portsmouth Climate Solutions, due to a lot of effort by a lot of good people on the committee, is now being called Portsmouth Climate Action. And under that, because we're looking how to structure this to bring everything together, there will be subcommittees. And because Bill couldn't be here tonight, you guys met your goal of getting best practices, but where do you go from here? And it seems to me, I would love to see it with your knowledge and with other people's interests, that maybe the Transportation Committee continue on, because there's now a structure, and that structure has access to us and to the City Council. And if your group in Transportation want to talk, how you might get some of those best practices from a citizen's involvement point of view and get it into the picture. That's what I see emerging here, and it's very encouraging. So, thank you. And the complete streets are so that the pedestrians and the bikes or vehicles and the cars are all considered, where right now it's been so long a priority on just the cars.
Quick question, how are you seeing electric bikes impact this?
Usually, bike accommodations can fit electric bikes as well. Yep. So, and I think electric scooters and one-wheels and whatever else. Once you get into it, there are definitely levels where, mobility devices become like golf carts and things like that. And I'm not sure we're at that point yet that we have to plan for that, but I think that electric bikes fit in very well.
What's that, Matt?
Question here?
Oh, yeah. So what does, you might know a little bit more about this, but at the high school, we were hoping to get more bike racks or there was some really concerned teacher about it, and they actually went to the city council meeting and put in a request for just like 2 more bike racks. We literally have 1, and it is like so many kids ride their bikes to school, like especially the freshmen, like in sophomores, they can't get a parking spot at the school yet, and some juniors don't even get them. So a lot of people are riding their bikes, but there's only 1 bike rack. So we were looking into getting like another one, and they asked the city, and they said it wasn't in the budget for it. So
I heard that, and Seacoast Area Bike Riders did offer to give a bike rack to the city if they can figure out where to install it. And I know there's also been other discussion with the Public Works Director and others, so I think it's coming.
Okay.
But yeah.
I can say the Portsmouth one is coming. I just talked to the teacher. So you are getting another rack, and then we're in the process of working on a new design system for all the schools.
Yeah, because I was like talking with one of my teachers today, and we were like, it's not like Eco Club. I brought it up, and we were like, we have like the funds that we could buy one for our school, but like ideally we.
The other idea we floated is when the weather warms up, getting a survey out, finding out where people want to lock their bikes and they can't, and also just going around doing counts at the schools and other places and seeing where the rack's overflowing, so we can look more holistically.
Yeah.
But I don't think that bike storage is necessarily my top priority. I feel like the safety of the network.
That's obviously the
top one,
first
and that's where I think
choice.
a group that is consistently looking at it throughout the year is, I think, the way to go. I haven't, to be honest, I have not had a lot of support for that in talking to city councilors and city staff because I think there's fatigue with so many meetings and so many blue ribbon committees and groups already. So another idea would be something independent of even a blue ribbon committee, just a citizen group that is working on these issues and maybe could meet with the planning department and the public works department a couple times, 4 times a year, let's say, and keep the pressure on to find out what's happening. So, love to hear, yeah.
This is gonna come off as a little snarky, but what is the size of the school department budget? And how much are they gonna spend returfing that football field, and they can't buy a couple of bike racks? Seriously? I mean, the
They're
school
redoing the
department should buy
football
some
field?
bike racks.
It reached its age of death.
It's perfectly fine. They didn't do it.
It's just the surface, but it is a very fair point, yeah.
I think
And it's not
Crazy
in
that we're
the,
having
it's
this
not in the rec.
conversation. Buy some bike racks and put them up.
I looked it up. You can buy like a really like cheap one for like $50, and it could work for a little bit.
If nothing else, it could be a great legacy gift from the class of 2023.
Oh yeah, I don't even know what our class gift is right now.
No,
Maybe
I
I'll
don't
look
want the
it up.
city off the hook, sorry. We're here to make this town accountable.
Downcycle plastic makes great benches and
And
bike
go-
racks.
And bike racks, there you go.
There are so many benches around our school that are like gift from class of. We can make
Well,
it special. Make it
Yeah, and I've got a question too. If the high school or the other schools need a bike rack, is that not a good opportunity for one of the programs at the high school? Don't they have metalworking
That's
program?
what, so that's what we've been
Welding.
taught. We
Welding
just had a
program?
bunch of conversations about it. Metalworking can't do it because it doesn't fall within their certs, but the woodworking group is really interested in it. And they're the ones that built the planters. And so we're just sourcing out the wood, the design, the whole size to get the lock. So, yeah, we've had a lot of conversations and to source them at all the schools. I mean, the middle school right now has the most racks and also the highest theft.
Yeah.
So we have the highest number of bike riders there. I guess it's something like 25% of those kids take a bike.
Wow.
But middle schoolers also forget to bring the bike home, and that's when the theft happens. I have one that's happened twice too, so But no, I talked to Courtney Richings of CTE after our last meeting, and I've been in touch with the metalworking and the woodworking and the teacher at the high school that's very involved. So there's plans in place. We can't have, the other problem with the schools is the locations that seem ideal are against fire code. So that creates another problem. Like at the high school, there's a lot more kids taking e-bikes. So it'd be great if you could put it under the eaves of the building, but you can't because it would go against fire code. So lots of conversations.
Solar canopy.
I was gonna say.
Exactly. This feels very organic.
We don't need aluminum, we're
I'm
gonna
aware
use upcycled
that
plastic for the frame.
we have 20 minutes left. We have another presentation and then the climate action plan. So I would like to encourage the gentleman to my right. Oh, wait a minute.
That's your left. That's your left.
The gentleman to the right who's chairing this meeting, to recognize the chairman, the person on my left.
Wow, Bert, that was very well done.
Please introduce yourself and then
Fred
kick it off.
Astaire, yeah, that move.
My name is Fred Calcinari. I was here at the last November meeting talking about electric vehicles, electric cars, and how that could be an important part of our solution to reduce greenhouse gases. And I made the point that the most important thing the city can do to help encourage that is to have more charging stations, and either through direct investment in more charging stations in parking lots, or changing building codes so that residential and commercial locations, multifamily dwellings, as part of the building code, have to put chargers in there so that, you know, if you live in an apartment complex, you have someplace to plug in a car if you want to buy one. So, and the question came up was, is there federal funding to help with that? And so Bill Lyons and I looked at a whole bunch of federal funding related to climate change. And I kind of did a deep dive on what money is there from the bipartisan infrastructure legislation on electric vehicles. And there's $5 billion towards electric charging stations nationwide. And of that, New Hampshire is eligible for 17.2 million, something like that. That funding is to the New Hampshire DOT. So the New Hampshire DOT has already applied for that funding, for that $17 million over 5 years. It's not really available for us to say we want some money to put some charging stations in a parking garage. It's really prioritized for what they call alternative fuel corridors. So the interstate highway system, the federal government wants, the states to put in charging stations at certain intervals along the interstate highways, and in future years also on the state routes. So that money is not going to be a big help for us in terms of having things, interstate charging stations. However, we can potentially influence the New Hampshire DOT on where they put those. So, if they could put them on I-95 corridor, they could be in Hampton or they could be in Portsmouth. And maybe we prefer they be in Portsmouth, so we can take advantage of people stopping off and having dinner at the Roundabout Diner or something like that. And just, so at any rate, I sent Herb some information about that, and there's an email address with the state DOT that we can write to and try to influence how they spend that money. But the general idea is that it's going to be over 5 years, and I guess 25 and 26 is when they're going to actually be implementing the charging stations. So there's a lot of time in preparation and planning, finding contractors and that sort of thing, and there's time to influence those decisions.
So a quick question on that is, those state liquor stores, I think we have, what, three right here on 95?
I was going to say, that's exactly where they're all going to go, in New Hampshire.
Yeah, right? And do any of those have charging stations today? I don't know, I don't go to them.
No, I don't
think so.
Not that I'm aware of.
So you're right, I mean,
And they're all right along the highway
it generates
corridors,
more
too.
revenue probably for the state.
The state owns
but-
it, so they're getting the money back anyway at the liquor stores.
The charging stations on the interstates are usually located next to big restaurants. Like on 93, there's the Common Man there in
Yeah.
Hooksett. So that's a good example. And there is a supercharger station in Seabrook already. So Hampton's pretty close to that, so.
Okay. So we may see the state looking at the state liquor store sites because they're right there and that meets the qualifications, most likely.
And it's part of what I sent you, contains because the state has to submit a plan, a high-level plan to get the funding allocated. And there are some maps with kind of high-level plans as to where they're going to put these charging stations. So that's available. I can share that address with anybody who wants to take a look at that.
And sorry, I ask one more question and I'll let others ask questions. I thought Bill had said too that in addition to the Inflation Reduction Act, that there may be some other federal Department of Transportation grants and such that could be available for municipalities like Portsmouth?
Yeah, so Bill and I kind of looked at, so we kind of did a deep dive on that one particular part of it. That was part of the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. That's the big chunk of money for the EV charging. But we looked at a bunch of other stuff that might be relevant, and we had kind of a list of high-level things we looked at, and we can do a deep dive in any one of those that you see fit.
Okay.
So for example, you asked earlier about charging, funding for charging low emissions. There's something called the Low Emissions Electricity Program as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And that has $87 million in funding for municipalities and states to invest in putting in solar panels and things like that. It's not a lot of money at a federal level, but there's something there, and there's potentially some use we can out of it. And in addition to that, there's funding in the infrastructure law for buses and bus facilities. That's something like $824 million. And carbon reduction programs, another $5 billion for that. That relates to public transit. Mostly that's through the Federal Highway Administration. There's a congestion management and air quality program. That's $15 billion. That's not specifically for greenhouse gases. It's for air quality in general. But that's a big chunk of money for improving bike lanes, things like that. So you have
I
less.
believe the Elwyn roadside path is getting funds through there.
Okay. And and then the enhanced mobility for seniors and others. So that's targeted toward public transportation, another $2.2 billion. So anything we do with enhancing our public transit, potentially could take advantage of that. And then also Safe Streets and Roads for All. That's the US DOT. That's $5 billion. Funding to help states and cities improve roads and reduce traffic deaths, including better safety for bikes and pedestrians. So a lot of funding in there to do some of the things we're talking about here.
And Frank, I think Fred, the last meeting we had, I think Peter had mentioned, this is great what we're talking about here, but this city is limited staff, and to actually dig into looking at or finding some low-hanging fruit, potentially that we could exploit, for lack of a better word, right, and use to our benefit, it might be advantageous for people like the ones sitting right here to tee some of these things up for city staffers that potentially.
I mean, there's $150,000 a year for the next 5 years for electric charging stations. The city's going to put in, so that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's federal money and parking revenue money towards that. So there's some going in. I don't know how many you want, but and I don't know what other options there are. But that's something that's happening right now.
And I think, real quick, just to piggyback on that, I think we talked about school buses too. And would there potentially, and I don't know if the city is looking at, or I don't know if that would be the school department that would talk to the company that manages the school buses about the opportunity to look at capitalizing on some of these funds to start, as school buses and their fleet start aging out, start looking at replacing those with electric buses and
Yeah, the
reaping.
city doesn't own its school buses. It's
Yeah.
a company, but somebody can talk to the company.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. You had, Chaz, you had a question?
Oh, I was just gonna say, in the research that you're doing, there's always a lot of excitement about rapid charging stations, right? How fast can we charge these? But a lot of the solutions also are in the slow charging stations that are a lot less exciting. Did you come across some stuff where it's like in the longer dwell times, for instance, like hotels having the infrastructure, or businesses where we might be for 8 hours a day? Was there any funding for those type of places on the slow charging stations? Because then it reduces the load on the rapid charging.
Right. So all the federal funding that we're talking about here is all targeted toward the fast DC charging. Because it's, again, it's targeted toward the highways, alternative fuel corridors. people want to be able to stop on a 500-mile trip and charge up in 30 minutes and, be on their way. But I think the slower charges have a huge place in this, particularly ones at residential locations or workplaces, things like that. And again, that's where the kind of investment that Peter's talking about, as well as the zoning changes and building codes will play a big part.
Just to talk about the zoning changes, there's no prohibition against putting a charger in your property. So the zoning change to require an EV, that would be, a different matter, and that would be I think it could be pretty controversial, and maybe it's something we want to look at, but right now, there's no prohibition against someone putting a charging at their house or at their apartment building. If we went to require EV charging, then I guess the question would come up, well, how does that meet the parking requirement? And then if are you gonna double your parking demand to have EV and regular, or do you let people park in both? So it becomes a more complicated issue, but certainly something that we'll tackle in the next few years.
Did anyone see Tom Morgan's article on this? It seemed like he was saying that the city only allows for fast charging on 3 streets. Is that accurate, or?
I don't know.
I mean, that was like the starting point of his article.
All I saw
so.
was that he said the city wasn't doing anything, and I guess.
According to him, he says their zoning provisions permit fast chargers along 3 commercial corridors, Lafayette, Woodbury, and Route 1, yet prohibit them elsewhere in the city.
They're not prohibited, that's not true.
I think we've actually had this conversation when it came to solar as well. I think he raised that concern, saying it was prohibited.
It's not.
It's just not specifically in the use table, is that what it was? So it's not prohibited per se.
As a standalone use, it might be prohibited, but to put a solar panel on your house or at your business, or to put charging at your house or your business, it's allowed. It's an accessory use.
In terms of the fast chargers, it's more likely that there's a much higher power infrastructure requirement for fast chargers. That's why we find them at Walmarts and large shopping centers.
Yeah, there's
So
a big commercial
Yeah,
piece.
there's only so many places you can put them today.
But it's certainly something that'll be looked at in the zoning ordinance over the next couple of years. How can we improve on it?
Being aware of 10 minutes left, I'd like to refer to the chairperson to see how many more items we have, and can we get them into the last 10 minutes here?
Do you have anything else you wanted to cover off on?
All set.
Okay, perfect. So I think we had an
Thank you
update on CAP, and I think that was the last item, and probably the only thing we have time for.
Before we jump on, can we just talk about, I mean, what are some of the next steps? Because the reason you gentlemen, I think, are here tonight is because in the last meeting, we said, what are some of the next steps? And you all went and did some more research and came back. So I know we're running out of time, but is there, I mean, what do folks here think is, I mean, I think the direction you're heading is in looking at, okay, here's some of the opportunities is great, and maybe we just need to package those up and,
Yeah, so our intention is to continue to working on the federal funding piece.
yeah,
Provide as much detail as we can to help kickstart any kind of, activities, but to access
Yeah.
those funds.
yeah,
And then also, the other thing that was mentioned last time was the community advocate for transportation, and we're working on that as well. So the TCAG group with Bill Lyons leading it intends to continue to work on this stuff as much as there's an appetite for it.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, is packaging these opportunities up for one, to potentially give to the city to look at, assess, and maybe take action. And 2 is on the community engagement side, is educating community, and these are things that Portsmouth Climate Action Group could take as part of the, initiative to educate the community on the climate action plan and steps that they can take. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm happy, because I think that the work that you gentlemen are doing is amazing. So, thank you, and I better understand now where TCAG is going next. So, okay. All right, back.
Great. CAP update. Who can give us a 3 to 4 minute update?
I'll make it super quick because we also kind of want to go over the schedule maybe briefly, or I can just send that out later and you guys can let me know by email if those dates work for you, but I have to get the room reserved soon. But for the climate action plan update, just working off of the TCAG group, I think that's going to be a pretty critical group that's going to have to be in contact and, you know, talking with our consultant in the future, and that's gonna sort of be our outreach, our sort of one-on-ones with different groups around the city and volunteer groups like that. So definitely hoping to see you guys in the future and work closely with you all. But for the climate action plan, Peter, feel free to chime in too. So we went through our round of final interviews a few weeks ago, and we have chosen our group. It is VHB, which is a local engineering firm, and they're partnering with Resilience Planning and Design, I believe they're called, which is another local group that's going to be sort of our community engagement experts. VHB will be more of like the engineering and ordinance and sort of big climate adaptation experts. And also Rockingham Planning Commission will be working with them as well. So they're going to be our sort of transportation
Hey,
liaisons.
could you say the three groups again, a little bit louder?
Yep, so,
Sorry.
yeah, they're all working together. It's VHB, and I can send around their proposal that they sent to us.
Great.
Yes.
So I'll send you all the PDF version over email tomorrow, but it's VHB, Resilience Planning and Design LLC, and then the Rockingham Planning Commission. And so, we're still working with legal to sort of get their contract through, so it's a little gummed up right now, but we're hoping to have our first official meeting with them and a signed contract by January, which we can hopefully sit down with everybody and I know talk about community engagement plans, but just get a sense of where the staff and different departments are and sort of meeting with them, learning what their team's going to be doing, and sort of getting a game plan together in January, hopefully. And so hopefully January, February, March, we can start doing more often, having meetings and get-togethers to talk about this stuff. Peter?
Yeah, I would just add that the real strong selling point, I think, for them was that their community engagement piece was to not just say, here's the formula, here's what we're gonna do, and throw it at us. It's, let's see what will work in Portsmouth, let's try different things, and then where they work, expand on them, and where they don't work, leave them and go on to the next thing. So, the development of the contract is gonna include that sort of back and forth on the community engagement. Is gonna be a big part of it, because as we've said all along, community engagement is so important. Resilience Planning and Design did our open space plan, so we worked with them before. We're out of Plymouth, New Hampshire, and VHB works on our stormwater and innovative stormwater regulations we've come up with. They've done a great job for us. And the Rockingham Planning Commission is our regional planning commission, who partnered with us on the Coastal Resilience Initiative and the vulnerability assessment for the historic district vulnerability assessment for sea level rise. So we've worked with all these firms before. They're the most local of all the people that applied, which seemed to help, I think, in having them around, and also knowing New Hampshire was important to the team that selected them. So I don't know, Brian was on the review committee too, if you have anything else to add.
Well, you covered it. That local, the other firms, there were some other good ones, but we wondered about, the distance and, the in-person.
Yeah.
But VHB has a lot of direct experience with this too. Their climate people.
Yeah, so we're optimistic that it'll be a good plan. Working on the contract now. You'll see in the proposal, they have a whole bunch of goals. I think it's 7 goals, 2 phases and 7 goals in one phase, and 3 or 4 in another.
Pretty much lines up with the RFP.
Yeah, it kind of lines up with the RFP, but what we asked them to do was turn that into a scope, and then we'll use that scope to finalize the contract.
And the time frame?
Should be within 2 or 3 weeks. We'll have the
No, I
contract.
mean, to do the whole project.
Well,
Because it was
we
somewhat
gotta go back and look at
accelerated.
it, because it's starting later,
Yeah.
but I think originally they were gonna end in October.
October,
So it'll probably
November.
be like November, December is what we're hoping. We're gonna push certainly for this calendar year from now.
Right.
Once the contract's signed, are we gonna have a big, press release unveiling, let the city know? That
Sure.
thing?
Yeah, we gotta have to definitely do that. We were talking about that today, is updating the website to talk about who we selected.
Website, yeah.
I'd like to also, in the first meetings, at some point, Lorelei actually asked, but have them come present to this committee, and I think we'll work that into the contracts. They can come present, get input from the committee. I think it can be really beneficial and
Great.
useful. And then also talk with the existing subcommittees and the subcommittees that aren't part of the sustainability committee too, or the committees, I guess. well, as we've talked about before, is how do we dovetail with other projects that are ongoing
Right.
to do the outreach, help those groups with their outreach, and also expand the climate action.
Right.
We're right up against it. Do we have a couple minutes to talk schedule, Kate?
Well, we might even have to push the schedule, and I can just email everyone and see, have you guys reply to me and see what's working. But I know Effie wanted to really quickly update us on
Yeah, I'll do it in like
community
1
engagement.
minute.
Okay, perfect.
Just a quick update from the Portsmouth Climate Solutions, which, as Bert mentioned, is now Portsmouth Climate Action. CRA has decided to fund a 1-year kind of pilot project with Bright Action, the community interactive platform that we looked at. And that's really important. Some of the actions we were talking about related to single-use plastics or transportation or other issues that came up tonight, we can activate through that. And we're working on web content and branding. So that's just a quick update.
Great.
We'll hear, I hope, more about that. That's been a wonderful thing that will connect to the goals we've had. I wanted to get an update. Some of you signed for Larry when we talked about, he was on many years and he was on the committee. He was going to go out to lunch with us today, but something came up after we lined it up. He can't. And so after the next meeting on January 26th, Peter, we haven't talked about this, but I talked with Larry. I said we could schedule it for then, and I would see how many people might want to join us for lunch on the Thursday meeting next month, and we'll make reservations just so we know anybody who'd like to basically acknowledge Larry's work on.
We can send out an email too.
You can send it out, but can I just have a show of hands? Anybody who might be interested in that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Because we can get a little table at Flatbread Pizza or something. Okay, you'll send it?
January 26th, you said?
Yeah, we could do that rather. He said the 22nd, but I think that's getting too close to the holidays for a lot of people, so.
So the next meeting's on the 26th?
Yeah,
That's the one date we should at least look at, Kate, on the calendar. Is that what we have, 26th?
yeah, I think
So,
that's what
yeah,
Kate has on
That's the first
there.
one, right after planning board, so the week after planning board.
Would that work? Okay.
Cool.
Anybody who hasn't signed this would like to know. We're at the meeting.
All right. Do we have the updated members? Are they all on the website? I know there's been a couple of changes here and there.
And I think on that list, right there.
Yeah, I
Is it-
think we
you
went through
Yeah,
and
but
updated.
there's Jay Lieberman's list on the website, but not here. Is he someone?
No, that was in front of
We
me.
may not have sent the letter in. Sometimes they won't take them off the list until they get an official letter, and I think we've asked for it.
I don't remember that name at all. Okay.
But I think he's off. He had, did he move or he had another commitment? I forget.
You're not down there yet.
Yeah. I
Okay.
actually-
I'll base the schedule on this. I think the schedule needs to change a little bit because I'm supposed to be the recorder, even though I was 2 months ago. So let me,
Okay.
I'll send an email out to everyone. I'll take a look at it. All right, we're wrapping things up. Before we do that, I think we all want to congratulate our new Planning and Sustainability Director, who's sitting right over there. And let's do a real quick, what do you take it away from this? Do you want to kill the Zoom?
I
or-
would
Perfect.
love to.
Thank you. What's your takeaway from today?
So in high school, some of like the smaller problems that we deal with can feel really big to like me, even just simple as getting bike